Good evening. Welcome to Christ Community United Methodist Church and to our district annual conference orientation. We're going to hear tonight from Reverend Alex Shanks and Ms. Molly McIntyre, who were the heads of our delegation to General Conference these last couple of weeks in Charlotte. And they're going to be talking about what's coming up at annual conference, things that will be coming from the realignment team to our annual conference session, and then also giving you a chance to hear an update on General Conference and to ask questions and get some answers this evening. So for those of you who haven't met me before, Dr. Debbie Allen, it is my great privilege to serve as your district superintendent here in the Southwest District. And could we just begin with a word of prayer this evening? Gracious God, we are so thankful for the opportunity to be gathered together and to talk about your kingdom and how we each work together on that in our local congregations and how we can come together as a Florida conference. And so we just pray your blessing upon our time this evening, that your Holy Spirit would be with us and uphold us. In Jesus' name, amen. Would you join me in welcoming Alex and Molly to be with us this evening?
Thank you, Dr. Allen. It's an honor to be among you here in the Southwest District, and we are just grateful for you being here. I think when you came in, you were given a card. You can write your questions down on the card, or with such a smaller group, it's fine if you just want to raise your hand and share with us your question. But I just want to share a little bit about annual conference. Annual conference is coming up in June, and we want to give you some orientation to what you can expect, give you a little bit of information from the realignment team, which is one of our major actions we will take, and then we'll share about the general conference. So our theme this year for annual conference is Come, Holy Spirit, Come. And we will be on the campus of Florida Southern College, which is where we've been the last few years in Lakeland. We begin on Thursday, and we conclude on Saturday. So the next slide, actually, if you'll go 2 slides ahead, the next slide tells you that we need ushers. So if you know anyone or you yourself are willing to volunteer at annual conference, we need persons who can serve as ushers for some of the sessions. That's always a need, but this year in particular, we're trying to get some new people involved, and so it's not a hard task. You don't have to do it for every gathering. You can just let them know when you're available, and that gives you the email on how to find out more about being an usher. And so, again, a reminder that annual conference is our annual meeting. It's a gathering of clergy and laity from all around the state, and it is our chance to act on some important items. The next slide will tell you about our pre-conference workshops. Those are going to be virtual this year to try to expand the number of people who can be involved and to make it so that you don't have to go up a few days early. So you're welcome to attend the pre-conference workshops. They're the week of May 20th. If you go on the website to pre-conference workshops, you'll see where you can register. It lists to you the different workshops. I'm leading one with Dr. Ann Kerr from Florida Southern on leadership. Molly, you're leading one on missions. There's lots of different topics for the pre-conference workshops. So if you want to be involved in that, they're all virtual, and we will try to record some of them and place them on the website as well. The next slide tells you that we are going to have a pop-up party. If you could just go to the next slide, the day before annual conference. So if you come up early on Wednesday from 5 to 7, we're going to gather at Bonnet Springs Park. Bonnet Springs Park is the largest privately funded, publicly free park in the state of Florida. It was recently opened in the last few years, and it's really close to the campus of Florida Southern and to our conference office. It is where the old railroad line was. And the land had sat vacant, people were living there, and some benefactors in the Lakeland community bought the property, refurbished it. It's now the home of a beautiful children's museum, an event center, and wonderful walking paths. It's just a gorgeous place, and we're going to have this little party. There's no agenda at the party. You can come and go. It's called a pop-up party because it'll have popsicles, popcorn, and soda pop. So all the good things, and we hope that you'll join us. It is optional. You're welcome to join us from 5 to 7 if you're in town the day before. Yes, ma'am. Yes, we will. There's going to be a map on the conference website that you can get to Bonnet Springs Park, and it's probably about a 5-minute drive from the campus of Florida Southern and close to where the conference office is. So again, if you want to come, the pop-up party is on Wednesday from 5 to 7, and you're all welcome. The next slide tells you about the Laity Adventure. That will be Thursday morning. Instead of having a laity session this year, we're going to have a Laity Adventure, give you a chance to explore the campus of Florida Southern, see some of the expos, and I think you get a prize at the end of it. I think it's an umbrella, maybe? I'm not sure I was supposed to say that, so don't tell anyone I told you. But it's I've seen it. It's a really nice one. But so that'll be the plan. Now, what that means is, if you don't want to come until Thursday afternoon as a lay delegate or a lay member of annual conference, that's okay. If you're not able to travel, you need to spend the Wednesday night at home, because Thursday morning we'll still be doing the Laity Adventure, and the opening plenary session will actually be Thursday at 1:30. So that just gives you an option. We're trying to extend the option. We will have some time during our plenary session where we'll hear from our lay leaders and from the Board of Lay Ministry, and they will say many of the things they used to share during the laity session. So the next slide gives you some information about registration. Registration will begin on Wednesday from 3 to 5 if you want to register early. Registration is in the lobby of Branscombe Auditorium, which is called the Honeyman Pavilion. That's on the campus of Florida Southern. And then it'll start at 8 o'clock the next morning, and you can register anytime during the day on Thursday and Friday. The next slide shares with you the basic agenda. So Thursday, when we begin, on June the 6th, we'll begin with the clergy session. That's where we vote on who is licensed, commissioned, and ordained, and that'll be the same time as a Laity Adventure. And then we'll have a lunch break, and there's lunch options there on the campus of Florida Southern and around the campus. 1:30 will be opening worship. Bishop Berlin will bring the message. You'll hear a report that afternoon from the realignment team. We'll vote on a couple of important items that afternoon. You'll also hear a report about what took place at General Conference. And then we'll have a dinner break, and we'll come back that night for the communion service. And the speaker that night will be Dr. Paul Chilcote, who is a Wesleyan scholar, wonderful preacher, and we'll be talking about how we as an annual conference can be rooted in our Wesleyan beliefs. And so feel free to join us on Thursday night. Friday will begin at 8:30 with the plenary session. There is a 5K run and walk if you want to do that around the lake right there at the campus. But we will have a Bible study led by an AME pastor, Reverend Dr. Shively Smith from Boston. She's a very energetic teacher and leader, and you won't want to miss the Bible study. We'll also hear a report that morning on our budget, as well as we will have our memorial service. The Reverend Vidalis Lopez will be the preacher for the service of remembrance, and that's when we will remember all the clergy and their spouses who have died since we last met. Then in the afternoon, we'll have some more plenary time and a few more important updates, including our Episcopal address from Bishop Berlin that afternoon, and then we'll have our retirement recognition service. And then that night will be a night of celebration. We're going to celebrate some ministries at our camp and our campus ministries. We'll have a deaconess who is commissioned that night, and a couple of other exciting things, so you'll want to be a part of that. We're going to charter a new church, so that'll be a fun night, Friday night of celebration. Saturday, we start, next slide, at 8:30. We'll also have a Bible study that morning with Dr. Shively Smith, and we will have our service of licensing, commission, and ordination will be done by about 12:30, and you can head on home. So that's the basic agenda. If you want a more detailed agenda, it is on the conference website as well as in the Whova app, if you'd like to follow that. The next slide just gives you some ways that you can get some more information. On the conference website, you can download the workbook of reports so that you can read everything and be prepared. You can see a map there with directions, as well as information for our expo. We have a text message function so that you can get updates that way, or the Whova app. All of that is on the website. Some voting items that we will vote on. We will vote on new conference leadership. So because it's a new quadrennium, we'll have new chairs of most of our committees, and so we'll vote on those. We will also elect a new conference co-lay leader. So Alice Williams has been our co-lay leader for the last 4 years, and she will roll off this year, and so Derek Scott will remain, but we'll elect a new co-lay leader to serve alongside of Derek. So that'll happen. We'll vote on our equitable compensation, on the minimum salary for clergy, the realignment team, which I'm about to go over. We're also going to vote to reduce the number of districts as part of the realignment team. And we do have some churches that are closing at this annual conference. And so we'll vote on those, and then we'll vote on our budget. So those are just a few of the items that we will vote on. The next slide begins the realignment team report. And I just want to remind you that the realignment team was formed by the last annual conference. And the goal of the realignment team was to gather a group of key clergy and lay leaders from around the conference and bring back a report that looked at our strategy for the future and also aligned our budget with our new reality. As you know, we lost about 35% of our churches, many of whom were in this district. This district was one of the districts impacted. And some of you actually are from a church that left the United Methodist Church, and you have stayed United Methodist. Thank you for choosing to stay United Methodist. We are very grateful for that. And so the realignment team worked on this for the last 9 months. We sent out the realignment team report about 2 weeks ago by email. It is on the conference website. You can read it there. I just want to give you the highlights. And I had the privilege to be a part of that team and to sit in that room. And I'll just tell you, these were people who really thought carefully about our future. And so how did we do our work? What the next slide will tell you is that we tried to be anchored in prayer. We prayed together. Bishop Berlin led us in some really important theological reflections on our mission, on who we are called to be, to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We gathered feedback from as many groups as we could. So we had about 25 focus groups from around the annual conference. We also had a survey that had over 600 respondents. So we really wanted to listen to what was happening in your local churches and try to make sure that our report reflected the reality of the annual conference. And we spent, as you can imagine, a good time reviewing our financial position and trying to think carefully through the finances of the annual conference. So the key recommendations that we will make and that we will ask you to affirm is that we are going to reduce the number of districts from 8 to 6. Now, that doesn't change the Southwest District. The Southwest District is remaining the same geographical size and will have all the churches that are remaining in this district. And your superintendent, Reverend Dr. Debbie Allen, will remain your district superintendent. She is taking on some additional responsibilities in the area of clergy excellence, and we are grateful for her willingness to do so. So the 2 districts that are being reduced is the Atlantic Central. That was a district that ran from Daytona Beach down to West Palm, and now that is going to get redistributed to the 3 districts who are closest to them. And then the North Central, which would be like the Ocala and Gainesville area, that area is being redistributed. So we'll have 6 districts, Northeast, which will stretch from Jacksonville down to Daytona and include Ocala. Northwest will be Tallahassee and Gainesville and all the towns in between. East Central will be Orlando, and that'll go all the way to the coast and include Melbourne and Vero Beach and a little bit of the west coast of Florida. And it'll also include the villages, so that'll be East Central, a large district. Gulf Central will be Tampa, St. Pete, Lakeland, all the way to the edge of the Polk County line. Southwest remains the same. And in the southeast, we'll go from the Florida Keys, from Key West, all the way to Fort Pierce. So you can just imagine that's a long district along 95. So those will be the 6 districts covered by 6 district superintendents. And that'll be a real change for us. But there was a time when the conference only had 6 districts, like back in the 60s, the 1960s. We grew. We actually had 14 districts at one point. We went from 14 to 9, from 9 to 8, and now we'll go from 8 to 6. We think 6 is the right number for the future of the conference. We're also establishing a new conference leadership team called the Ministry Hub. So currently we have something called the Strategic Leadership Team, which is all the members of the cabinet and some others. This Ministry Hub will be more based on the ministry areas within the annual conference. Our goal is to increase the number of representatives who are in local churches and to try to reconnect ourselves to what is happening in the local church through the Ministry Hub. We also have heard from a lot of folks in our focus groups and our surveys that you wanted more training, and we know that there's a lot of training online. There's also in-person training. So we're creating on our website a simple place to find all the training opportunities. So, how do you get trained on how to be a trustee or a finance person or staff parish, or to do evangelism or a stewardship campaign or youth and young adults? So all of that will be on the conference website. We also are encouraging new things to take place through something we're calling the Innovation Hub, and that'll be a training where people can look at, here's what we've done. In churches we've kind of always done it that way, and so how can we do some new things through innovation? And so this will be a great opportunity. That'll connect to some things we've done in the past, like MLab and design thinking. And then the other key recommendation is to reduce the conference budget. And I'll go over that in just a minute. The next slide gives you kind of the areas that will be representative in the Ministry Hub. So the Ministry Hub will look at the vision of the annual conference. It'll encourage collaboration and try to create some creativity. So we'll have people in that Ministry Hub who are involved with lay connection and formation, as well as clergy recruitment and formation, focused on young people, on our justice and advocacy, on our commitment to being a multicultural church, our missional engagement area that Molly leads, and then new expressions of church. We are going to hire a part-time person to work on new church development. We do think that we need to start some new churches. We have a new church in this district. It's called The Channel. It's out down in the Lee County area, kind of the eastern part of Lee County, and they are trying to start house churches and online communities, and it's a growing, functioning church. So if you know someone who lives in LaBelle or in Cape Coral or in Fort Myers or some of those areas, Estero, and they're looking for a United Methodist connection, The Channel is a great option for them. And Reverend Christy Holden, and she's the leader of that. We've got a new church in the Villages. The Villages are the fastest growing area in Florida. So we'll now have 3 churches in the Villages, and we have a new church in Tampa. So we've got some new churches that we've started. We want to look strategically about how we start new churches and develop fresh expressions. The next slide is just kind of a visual representation of the Ministry Hub. It's a little hard to read it, but all of those will connect together when they gather, and they'll gather every other month to do the work with the bishop. But we're taking what was just a few persons who served local churches on our strategic team. We're increasing that by more than 50% to really say, how do we reconnect ourselves to what's happening in local churches and to have things that happen at the conference that actually help you do what you do in your local church. Because that's actually the purpose of the annual conference, to equip where the ministry takes place. The next slide goes over our budget, I believe, and it's a little hard to read, but I'll just tell you the good news. We are reducing our conference budget by 35%. When you go from 2023 to 2025, we're reducing it by 35%. Now, why are we doing that? Well, we lost 35% of our churches and about 35% of our paying units. And we didn't want you in your local church to have your apportionments go up because you stayed United Methodist. We wanted to keep them as close to flat as possible. Now, that doesn't mean every church will be flat, because some of you, the way apportionments are figured out is they take the whole for the annual conference and they divide it up by how much money you spend on yourselves, basically your operating expenses. And so if you've increased that, or you've increased some things, you might have a small increase in your apportionments. But our goal is to keep it flat. Now, will it always be flat? Probably not. Inflation and just the cost of living and all of that. But we wanted to make a reset. And so how did we do that? We reduced districts from 8 to 6. So that's 2 less district superintendents and 2 less district offices. We will no longer have what I call extended cabinet positions. So at the conference office, we'll have the bishop, myself as the assistant to the bishop, and then the rest will be lay staff who will help lead us. We've reduced we had some nonprofits that we supported. We've reduced those grants. We reduced some of our grants to one of our colleges. We're going to try to find another way to partner with Florida Southern. So we made some significant decisions. And those were not easy decisions, but we did those in order to keep the resources in your local church, because that's where the ministry takes place. And we're really committed to ongoing work to reduce the conference budget. The general conference, and I'll have Molly speak about this in just a minute, also reduced their budget, and that helped as well. So your general church apportionments were greatly reduced. So that's the budget. So that's the realignment team report. And where do we go from here? I will tell you that our goal in this work is not to finish it, but to take the next faithful step. So we're kind of turning a page, beginning a new chapter. We want to create space for the work ahead, ask the right questions, knowing that we still have work to do. So we need a strategy for vitality in every local church and in Fresh Expressions, and many of you are working on that. We need a strategy for new church development, for advancing the work that we're already doing in creating the beloved community through the work of anti-racism as part of our call as disciples of Jesus. And we need a strategy for reaching students and young adults, the next generation. We really tried to not impact our campus ministries, our camp ministries in this new budget. We wanted to keep our focus there. So that's the realignment team report. Now Molly is going to come, and together we'll tell you a little bit about General Conference. If you have a question, just write it down, or if you have a question right now you want to ask about any question, let's just pause here. Are there any questions about Annual Conference or about the realignment team report? Anything you want to know about? Yes.
You mentioned apportionments being affected based on how much you spend. Now, our hurricane repairs aren't going to be affecting the apportionment.
Capital expenses don't include that. Yep, you're fine. Yeah, great question. And you know, one of the things we know is that your insurance went up this year. And I just want to remind you that for 7 of the last 8 years, the conference absorbed the increase in your insurance. So your insurance premium went up, and we just absorbed it at the annual conference level. Well, we finally reached a period where we could no longer do that. And because we lost a number of our churches, we had to pass on the insurance increase. Some of you in your home insurance, they went up even more. We know churches who left who can't even get insurance. They're just living without storm insurance and hoping and praying that works out. So you have really good insurance coverage, and it's not a perfect system, but it works. And so no, capital expenses are not included in your apportionment calculations. It's more of your salaries, the cost of operating your buildings, but it doesn't include like your missional expenses, like if you have a food pantry, the thrift store that's here. I don't think that's included. Yes.
Last year was my first annual conference.
Oh, and you loved it.
I did. I swear to you, I came back and was so excited.
Oh, good.
But I didn't have a clue what I was voting on.
Sure.
And they were saying page number such and such, and some book that had 1,000 or so pages. So how will I be able to educate myself to know what is being?
Great question. So if you go on the conference website, it's not there yet. I think they're finalizing it, so it'll be there next week, I think, is the workbook. And the workbook is the most important thing to have read before you come to annual conference. Yeah, if you read the workbook, and I actually, if you get to about halfway through, the second half are kind of reports from our partner agencies. You don't need to read every seminary report, every college report, but the key will be, and the things I would focus on. So here are the key votes we will take. We will vote on conference leadership. And so if you want to look at who's been nominated from the Conference Committee on Leadership and Nominations, we'll vote on that, including the new co-lay leader. We will vote on equitable compensation, which is just the minimum salary, but that does impact kind of how other churches, even if your pastor is not at minimum salary, sometimes you will base it off of that. So we'll vote on that. We'll vote on the budget, so make sure you've read the budget. And the recommendation to reduce districts. Those are 4 key things. We do not have this year any resolutions that were submitted. So which makes our life a little easier, which means we'll have a little bit more time. So we don't have any resolutions. So, yeah.
You used to send the workbook out.
Yeah, and we don't do that anymore.
For somebody who doesn't have a printer or limited means.
Yeah.
That's a lot of printing.
I agree. If you need us to print it for you, you give me a call and I'll send you a printed copy, okay? But yes, I agree with you. I wish we could print it. We made some efforts in the last few years to reduce our expenses, and that was one of the ways.
I saw a lot of lay folks with their phones.
Yeah, and you can see it online.
But not all of us can do that.
Right. Debbie?
If someone in our district needs a printed copy, if you'll call Sandy in the district office,
Yeah.
we'll arrange.
Yeah, Sandy will absolutely print it for you and get it for you.
And my suggestion is, if you have an electronic device, download that workbook, because if you are relying on the Wi-Fi at annual conference, you might be buffering.
Yeah, you can download it to your phone or your electronic device. But if you need a printed copy, we'll absolutely just call Sandy in the district office. Yes, ma'am.
Could you help me understand again the ministry hub? I didn't quite catch that. Are those individuals in Lakeland gathering together working?
Yeah. So the idea will be there'll be representatives from around the conference. So the 2 that are going to lead the innovation work, for instance, one is a pastor in Orlando and one is a pastor in Fernandina Beach near Jacksonville. And they will be the leaders of that innovation work, and they will come to the ministry hub to coordinate the work of innovation with the others. Molly will come to represent missional engagement. I will be there as the assistant to the bishop. The bishop will be there. Debbie will be there as part of the clergy excellence. The co-lay leaders will be there. So it'll be leaders of these different groups. We have a group that works on social justice and advocacy. They'll be at the table. And so it's actually back to, if you think of your church council is kind of a ministry hub, where all the different ministries come to coordinate their work. That's actually what we used to do on something called the Conference Council on Ministries. But we didn't want to call it that because that takes us back to the way we used to do it. But it's more similar to that than the strategic leadership team, which was mostly the district superintendents and the cabinet and more staff-laden. This includes conference staff, some cabinet members, but also includes a lot of pastors and laity from local churches. You're welcome. Thank you. Great question. There are still district superintendents. Yep, there'll be 6 district superintendents. Debbie will be the district superintendent of this area, and there'll be 5 others. That's true. We have a much more balanced group of superintendents. So let's see. Though there are two men. There are two men on the district superintendent. So David Allen will have the northeast area, and Simon Osenlana will have the southeast area. But yes, there are more women than men on in the cabinet. So, yeah. And there's also, it's a very diverse cabinet. Half are persons of color. Yeah. So it's so most of the structure is remaining the same. We'll still have a conference board of trustees, a conference committee on finance and administration, all of those normal administrative functions. The ministry hub is really replacing what we used to call the strategic leadership team and the conference table. Okay, any other questions about annual conference or anything we're going to vote on? All right, now we're going to tell you about general conference. And Molly and I were one of 2 of 16 of your delegates. So you elected us way back in 2019. You elected us, and this was the delayed, as you know, general conference. Molly led our lay delegation, and I led our clergy delegation. This is Molly's 3rd general conference and my 4th general conference. So we've been around doing these, and it was a great general conference. And we are really pleased to bring back this report to you. If you were with us Tuesday night, you heard some of this. We'll go over some of that. We'll take your questions. But it was a great general conference. Florida was well represented. Bishop Berlin presided over one of the sessions of the general conference as a new bishop. Not every new bishop got to do that, and he did a great job. If you want to see general conference, you can go back and watch a bunch of these videos, and there's some great worship, there's some great sermons, there's some great things that you can really be proud of as a United Methodist. But here's some of the things that we accomplished. We passed something called regionalization, and so the next slide will tell you that regionalization is a way to restructure the global church. And so currently, the global church has a general conference, central conferences that are outside the United States, jurisdictions within the U.S., and then annual conferences. We passed a new regionalization plan that will basically create 6 regions. So there'll be the region of the United States, the region of Europe, 3 regions in Africa, and then a region of the Philippines. And those regional conferences will allow those parts of the church to adapt some portions of the Book of Discipline to make them more contextually appropriate to that setting. So we'll still have a Book of Discipline, we'll still have a general conference, and the doctrine will stay the same for everybody. The social principles will be the same, the major organizational pieces. But if in Africa they want to have different standards related to ordination, they can. Or in the Philippines, if they want to have a different way of understanding related to marriage, they can. Those are just some examples. You could have other things. And so this was approved by the General Conference. The goal is to help each region reach more people for Jesus. That's the goal. And we will live into this. We do have to have it approved at the annual conference level. So next year at annual conference, you will get to vote on these constitutional amendments. I know that gets you really excited, doesn't it? I mean, don't you want to be a part of making history? So we do this every 4 years. When the Constitution changes at General Conference, then we have to vote. And I'll just tell you, not everything gets ratified by the annual conferences. In fact, we had a worldwide plan for reorganization back in 2008 that was voted down by the annual conferences the next year. So that does happen. So we'll want you to be there and to be educated. We're not going to try to do it this year because we want to give you time. There were a number of constitutional amendments made, and we'll vote on all of those next year. If that passes, then we will live into this reality of regionalization. So I think this is a really good thing for the church. I think it allows our siblings in Africa, our brothers and sisters in Africa, to really feel like they can be a part and have a way to adapt the Book of Discipline. I think it will really help us, and it will also help us. Some things at General Conference only have to deal with the U.S. We never had a way to deal with those. So they would have to sit and listen to us talk about our pension plan, even though it has nothing to do with them. And so now we'll have a chance to do that just with the U.S. region. So that's regionalization, and that was on that slide, and the following slide kind of tells you a little bit more information about that. And it really did, I will tell you, regionalization came out of the central conferences. So people outside the U.S. said, this is what we want. We need this. And so that really made the church in the U.S. pay attention to it. The Standing Committee on Central Conferences, the Christmas Covenant folks, the Connectional Table, they worked on it. And it received significant support from all around the United Methodist Church. The other thing I'll go over, and then I'll hand it over to Molly, we did change our language related to the restrictions related to LGBTQ persons, or gay and lesbian persons. And so, as you know, this has been a 50-year debate within the church, and like most churches within the United States, we have now become more open. And the reality is, and I'll put it to you this way, I think what we have done in this vote is we've actually become who we already are as a church. You as a church already welcome all people. You have family members who are gay and lesbian. You have people in your community, and they've always been welcomed in your church. And you've always told them that Jesus loves them and cares about them. And you've seen them for who they are. So all we have done is made our church law coincide with what's already happening in our local churches. Now, does that mean we all agree? It does not. And I hear that. I do. I have family members who have a very traditional viewpoint, and I love them, and I care about them, and they love me and care about me, and we're both followers of Jesus, and we both read the Bible, and we both take it seriously. So what I love about what we did is we allowed ourselves to take out what I would say was some harmful language, and we also protected those who want to keep a more traditional viewpoint. And both will be able to coexist within the United Methodist Church, as we do now, as we always have. So as you know, in 1972, we added language from the floor of the General Conference to say the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. Just that word incompatible, by the way, if you think about it, it's not a very theologically accurate word. I don't know of any time that Jesus said that's incompatible. In fact, it's the only place we use that word in the whole discipline, and it was added from the floor. That language has now been removed, and if you want to read what we've said about sexuality, you can read it. It really talks about people being able to express that in a way that honors God and their faith and honors who God has made them to be. So that language has been removed. We used to have a ban on who could be ordained, and we said if you're self-avowed practicing homosexual, you can't be ordained. That's now been removed. So now if the person is approved by their local church, by their Board of Ordained Ministry, their district committee, their Board of Conference Board, and the clergy session, we can ordain and appoint. The next slide tells you that we also took out the chargeable offenses. We used to put people on trial, and we've had trials in our country here in the United States if you performed a wedding or if you were ordained. So those chargeable offenses are gone, the penalties are gone. We used to have a ban on how you could spend United Methodist funds. That's gone. So all of that has been taken out. And what we've added in, what the next slide will tell you, is we've added in very clear language that says to pastors, you decide what weddings you do. Now, they already do, but we wanted to make sure that it was clear that there is no one who's going to force a pastor to perform a wedding. In fact, we will legally defend you if someone sues you for not performing a wedding. And we said that to the clergy today, made that very clear. It is their choice, just like it is now. But we wanted to make that clear. We also made it clear that local churches If they want to have a policy about what happens in their sanctuary, they can have that policy. Now, they would need to do that through their conference board, their local church board of trustees. So your trustees would meet and talk about that. Now, do I think that needs to be on your agenda next month? I do not. The truth is, most people who get married these days don't get married in a church. And so what I would do is, if a couple in the next few years comes and says, we want to get married, and then you need to have a conversation, it would be a conversation with the pastor first, then with the trustees, maybe with the church council, the leadership, and it would be a collaborative conversation. And you'd figure that out. I don't think you need to have a church-wide vote or conversation. I just don't think that's a helpful or useful time to spend. The other thing that we will do is we will make sure that we continue to consult with churches around, are you ready to receive a clergy person or not? Just to be clear, it's not like we have a huge section of our clergy or a group that are ready to serve, but we do have some. And some have lived in hiding. That's the only way I know how to put it. And we will look for congregations who say, we're open to this. And that'll be part of the consultation. But that would be a consultation with the staff parish, which we already do now. And we do that around a lot of different realities. So no one is going to try to force someone to change or compel them. We will be a church that has very traditional, conservative-minded people, moderate, whatever word you want to use, that's what will be in our United Methodist Church. But now you can say to your friends and family, everybody's welcomed. Everybody's welcomed. And that's, I hope, a gift to you and to your church. And I recognize that for some, that will be a struggle. And we already have stories of churches where the pastor has received notes from lay people who no longer feel comfortable attending. And I just will say to you, if that's you or a friend of yours or someone you know, encourage them to not make a decision, but to have a conversation and to really think about what has changed in your local church. So I could say a lot more, but that's probably enough. I'll turn it over to Molly.
All right. You can tell who the clergy person is and who's the lay person. Okay, so in the next slide, some of the other major actions that we took were apportionment percentage decreased, which is a helpful thing, especially in the Florida Conference. So we had a shift in the current base rate. The current base rate is 3.29, and that in 2025 and 2026 will go down to 2.6%. One of my favorite things to tell everyone is 2 of our Florida delegates, actually probably we all owe them a lot, because they were trying to raise the base rate again, which meant there would be an increase of $40 million, which means like the Florida Conference would have had to come up with an extra $300,000. But Cynthia Weems and Alex Shanks put in a compromise that if the apportionment collection rate is at 90% or higher in 2025 and 2026, then it will increase to 2.9% for 2027 and 2028. That is a very slim chance that it will actually be collected at 90%. I think, when did they say the last time? 2016? The last time it was at 90% was 2016.
Collection rate last year was closer to 70%, so yeah.
So it's hard.
Worldwide, not in the Florida Conference. We did better in Florida.
It's hard because some of our agencies, like Global Ministries, which is like UMCOR Global Ministries, like their budget was decreased by 50%. So that's really, really hard, very hard. But then it also helps annual conferences not have to put so much into apportionments, and we can pour more into our local churches. So the budget is that we approved is $373.4 million. Again, if the total, or that is if the collection rate is at 90%. If the collection rate is not at 90%, then it will go down to $353.6 million. One of the things so a lot of the budget that we had to deal with was dealing with the Episcopal Fund, which is our bishops around the world. In the United States, we have 39, and by September 1st, that will go down to 32 bishops. So those are ways that we're trying to make sure that we are working with our annual conferences to make sure that, we could have kept it like at 36, but that would have been another huge cost to our annual conferences, or that would have been less money for things like Global Ministries and UMCOR. So it's going to be like a little hard for some of our bishops, but they are ready for the work, and it'll look a little different, but we have great leadership, especially in Florida. We also approved a new retirement plan for our U.S. clergy that came from Westpath, and that was called the Compass, and that does not take into effect till 2026. But all of our clergy will be educated on how that works, and they'll have time to prepare for that before 2026. Then our next slide. So how many of you have ever read one of the social principles? Awesome. So the social principles, these are not the church law, but these reflect the official United Methodist teachings. You can find a social principle on about everything. So if someone's like, what's the United Methodist beliefs on A, B, C, D, F, G? There's something in the social principles, most likely. We have not had a major overhaul of the social principles in about 50 years. A lot has probably changed in 50 years, right? So it was time, and in 2012, General Conference went to Church and Society and said, hey, we really think that it's time. And so over 4,000 voices were heard from around the world. Florida actually had the most participants, which is really awesome. And so we have all new social principles, many different topics. They provide for churches like really cool, like individual, just, little flyers. And so that's one thing that you can have in your local church. They're not out yet, but if there's like a specific topic that you really want in your community, maybe it's like farm workers or anything, they have a social principle, and they're super helpful when you have visitors and people are like, what is United Methodist beliefs on this? And you have that. But those are all online. And at the end, we give resources where you can find a lot of these things. On our, yeah. Oh, you're good.
I'm back to, sorry. You mentioned that the regionalization allows regions to take some of the issues or items or whatever and deal with them contextually. Okay, where is that then in the discipline, or is that, where would one see that, or is that in the social principles?
Yeah, great question. So the social principles are in the discipline. We do have Book of Resolutions. Those will be contextually adaptable, the Book of Resolutions. Yep. And what I've been told, and this has not yet been worked out, but we have a statement in our social principles on marriage. And it was actually edited on the floor from a woman from Zaire, where it is clear that marriage is traditionally understood as between a man and a woman, but it can also be between two persons of faith. What I've been told is that the regional conferences will have the ability to adapt, add to some of that, to say some things that are specific, contextually true, as long as it's not in conflict with what. So what we did in reducing the social principles, because this was it was also a revision and a reduction, to try to get it clearer to what is globally true for all of us, what is biblical, what is according to our Wesleyan heritage, and then if they need to add something that is the official teaching of the regional church in Africa, they can. So they can add to it, or they could add to the chargeable offenses or add to the organization. Does that help?
Yes.
And that is why regionalization is a very helpful thing. As you know, someone in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is facing something very different than I'm facing here in Florida. So it's a helpful thing. On our next slide, we have, all right, so this one, so one of the things that, everyone was talking about was there's some petitions about disaffiliation and ending the disaffiliation policy. So the disaffiliation policy did end. We voted for the 2553 to end. So that is no longer a way for any church to disaffiliate. Every conference will have the decision on what disaffiliation will look like, and I know Alex will add more in a second, but every conference will have that choice. So, there are already some conferences that are having the conversation on what that will look like. Then, one of the other things that we passed, which a lot of Florida folks spoke on this, it was very important for them, that we have basically grace-filled policies for re-affiliation of churches that want to rejoin the denomination. That, again, is up to the annual conference. So South Georgia could have a different policy than the Florida conference, but that will be leaders from around the conference deciding together what that will look like. At the moment, there are not any churches that are in the Florida conference. There are some other conferences that have actually had people already reach out to them to come back into the United Methodist Church. And one of the reasons we really wanted that is because we're all in a journey, right? And we don't want to close our doors. It's very raw still for many people, but in 5 years, who knows where a church could be. And so having that policy for them, if they choose to really re-affiliate with the United Methodist Church. And also, we had a question about clergy, and that's...
There'll be a process for clergy who want to come back as well. So we'll work that out with those.
So, yes, a lot of that was really left open to the annual conference to decide, because also every annual conference is so different. And so that was a helpful thing, that our conference is able to work together to figure that out. Then the next slide, we have, so there was a lot of things that we voted on and talked about. There was a lot of things that we just couldn't get to, right? Which is really hard. And so come next general conference, there's going to be things that unfortunately we had to put off until the next one. There's just so much and so little time. But some of the things that we did that were pretty exciting, and also the last one was sad, but it was also like a moment. I'll go into that more in a little bit. But we approved full communion agreement with the Episcopal Church as long as they approve it. They vote on that in 2025. And so if they approve it, then we will have full communion agreement. We already have full communion agreement with
The Lutheran Church.
Lutherans.
And the Moravian Church.
Yes, thank you. So that will take place as long as they also affirm it. We approved allowing deacons to provide sacraments, such as Holy Communion and baptism, and that in their appointments. And that will take place on January 1st, 2025. One of the moments that was really, really hard, but also like a really beautiful moment in a weird way, was that we voted for the 4 Eurasian conferences to leave the denomination and form an autonomous church. You'll often hear from certain groups that we don't allow, especially our central conferences, to be able to leave. Well, that was an example of 4 conferences in Eurasia to leave. So there are ways that they can leave, even if you have read differently, they can leave. But one of the reasons, it was done in such a healthy way. They went through all the steps. It was hard, right? Because that includes Ukraine, and that's hard right now. And what's exciting is some of them will continue to be United Methodist in their own ways, in a different way, right? But the bishop, if you go back and watch the bishop over these conferences, the way he spoke about the United Methodist Church, and I kept saying like, this is such like the good stuff that, like, we have so many good things. But he was talking about like the education, global ministries, UMCOR, like it goes on and on. But it was just like a beautiful moment, and there was a lot of tears because you don't want to lose anyone in the United Methodist Church. But it was also a really, really healing moment for them, and we stood for them. And who knows? In 5 years, they might come back. But right now, they have chose to leave. But it was an example that they can leave, but also such a healthy way to do that. And the bishop's words were very, very powerful. There are tons of resources. It's a lot, right? So when you were asked, like, I don't even know what I'm voting on. I remember when I started all of this, I was like, what? Like, oh, nope, this is crazy. But I learned so quickly that there are truthful resources out there. And one being our conference website. The bishop put out almost every day, a video that walked through so many of the things that we voted on. We had other lay folks that did videos. There's, just graphs of like everything how it worked, what we voted on. Super helpful. I found myself every day reviewing those documents because they were so helpful. So the conference website has tons of resources. Also, resourceumc.org. So much of what people are speaking about is literally coming from that website. So that is another really great resource. They even just came out with how to talk to your church about General Conference. So if you're, teaching a Sunday school or a Bible study and you're like, I don't even know how to bring this up, there's a resource for that. And so definitely both of those websites are really great for you to go on and see the truthful facts of what went on at General Conference.
All right. What questions do you have about General Conference? Yes.
In corporate America, usually your salaries is your biggest budget item. So you have all these reductions in bishops and district superintendents. Are those being done through attrition?
Yeah, so the bishop reductions are being done through attrition. And so we moved from 39 to 32 because there are 7 who are retiring this year. In 2028, there will be 18, 32 minus 18, so however many. There'll be 18 bishops who don't have to mandatorily retire. So we'll be able to reduce again. We'll probably elect some bishops. So we did do it through attrition. The same with our district superintendents. We were able to do that through attrition. One of our current district superintendents in the Atlantic Central District is married to another clergy person, wanted to remain in the local church. They received an appointment. But we really tried not to harm anyone in these reductions. The same with the general agencies. When they reduced their staff by 50%, they tried to do it by attrition. Yeah.
How does this reduction and this change affect the finances of these people who are no longer being a part of it, going from 30 to 25 bishops? Are they still going to be able to be paid retirement or not?
Retirement is a totally separate thing, and that's fully funded and fully vested, and they're taken care of in retirement. No one has been...
And I'll give an example. So going to 32 bishops, we in the Southeast had to reduce to 9 bishops, but we will have 10 bishops. So that gives opportunity for a bishop to move to another jurisdiction. So in the Southeast, North Central, and South Central, there's going to be too many bishops, and we're not going to say, okay, you're out, you're out, figure it out. We will help them figure out an area in another jurisdiction that they feel called to.
Correct.
Yeah. Retired bishops are definitely good.
They still remain bishops for life, and their retirement benefits are secure. Sandy, did I see your hand?
I just wanted to know if he's sharing a bishop. Florida was shared, Bishop Carter, sharing bishops.
Yeah, so that decision has not yet been made. Molly and I are on the Committee on Episcopacy that are working on that. I convene a task force that is working on that. I can tell you that the last recommendation was that Florida would have its own bishop because of its large geographical size. I am hopeful that will not change.
Yeah.
So that's not the plan.
And then just about general conference, it was amazing. We were watching online and seeing everybody from the world meeting together. When we go to regions, will they then not gather together?
But we'll still have general conference. We'll still have general conference, and we will still meet globally. Yep. Just be shorter, maybe, which would be nice.
It was a long 2 weeks.
Yeah. Any other questions about general conference? Or things in your church, people in your church are asking, or things that would help you in your local church? We said about 7, so we're about that time. Are you sure? We want to make sure you've driven far away. We want to make sure you feel good.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, Nancy.
Will we did regionalization, will the United States meet and have a meeting that is its own general conference?
It'll be called a regional conference, and yes, they will meet and deal with things. I think every 4 years is the plan. Yep.
The same year as
Yes. And probably what would happen is we might, go early to wherever the general conference is and meet as a regional conference, make some decisions that then can be ratified by the general conference.
I understood you to say that the items we will be voting on at this annual conference are on the website.
Yes, once the workbook is there, which I think will be next week. But yes, they're in the workbook. Yeah.
Is anyone here who's never gone to annual conference before? Okay, excellent. So when you first get there, after you've gone to the pop-up party, the next day, look for me and I'll get you registered.
Yeah. And Florida Southern's a great place, and there's parking all around the campus. There's shuttles if you need help getting from your parking lot. And so, yeah, and if you've never been or if you have a question, don't hesitate to ask. We love people with questions.
Also, you have a really great lay leader who has all the knowledge. So Nancy is a great resource if you have questions about specific things that you're voting on, or you are wondering why, Alex is still on the stage or things like that. Nancy is your person. That was very helpful. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. You've honored us with your time. We are very grateful. Please feel free to reach out if we can help in any other way. And Debbie, you want to say a closing word?
Nancy and Sandy, if you would stand up just for a second. So if you've not met Nancy Metz, our district lay leader, she's been trying to reach out to lay leaders all throughout the district and gather folks together. She's a great resource. So if you've not met her before, introduce yourself. And the face that goes with the voice and the email in our district office, Sandy Voigt. So we're grateful for her. Thank you, Glenn and Rini, for helping us tonight hosting here. We're very, very grateful, again, for your presence, and continue to reach out. If you think of questions later, please feel free to email myself or Sandy, and we will get you an answer. I sent out a resource list to your clergy today after our gathering that is a couple other websites that give information about General Conference and some links to some of the worship services and the plenary session where we talked about regionalization, because the folks who did that presentation did a phenomenal job of addressing why regions outside the United States are really seeking for regionalization. And so I think you can understand it better if you hear it from them. And so we're going to make sure if you signed up, then Sandy knows that you're here, and we'll send that out to you by email. If you did not register but just showed up tonight, let Sandy know that you're here on your way out so we can make sure to include you in that email blast. Okay? All right. Let's stand together and we'll sing the doxology to close out our time. Praise God from whom